I've seen the Iron Claw a couple of times now.
Great.
I didn't stupidly, I didn't go into the first time I watched it, I didn't know anything about the story.
Neither did I.
And I was like, oh, it's a wrestling drama. And then I did not realize the magnitude of tragedy that this family
Yes.
uh went through. And it just, I don't know, the heaviness of that really stuck with me. And I something that I am very curious about. My brother was really into wrestling. I never really got into it, but I think it's something that is so interesting is, a lot of wrestling is a lot of machismo, a lot of sweat, muscles, masculinity, but the theatricality is so unbelievably colorful and fun and sort of it doesn't butt heads with the idea of that masculinity, but they pair very beautifully side by side. And I guess I wanted to know, as a costume designer, what is that like to play with?
That's an excellent question. I mean, I completely agree. Also, somebody from a background of not knowing much about wrestling and maybe
Hmm.
having some preconceived notions of wrestling, and whatever that is, it doesn't really matter. When it finally came to complete fruition in front of me, and you have like Chavo training the boys, and I'm doing the costumes for them, and it's
Hmm.
choreographed, and Sean Durkin made sure to put all those nuances in of this is live theater, this is
Hmm.
athleticism, like, extreme athleticism. These guys have to be in like top form in order to even perform at their peak, but they also
Yeah.
have to be like choreographers in a way, and they will still get injured. But meanwhile, they have a persona. They're wearing costumes. It could be
Hmm.
so far as Ric Flair, who is looks like Liberace, and his nickname's Nature Boy. I mean,
Hmm.
and then you also it's an ancient sport, and it's very masculine, but it also has those positions where you're like, what is going on here? I think that's what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah.
And I obviously loved just sort of basically it was so organic because the sport is an ancient sport and now it
Hmm.
is trailed into this. And what this Von Erich family had done was kind of they were the pioneers of what we kind of consider wrestling today. They were kind of the ones that
Mm.
brought it out of the 50s, 60s and put it into the 80s, 90s, and especially the 90s is what we kind of think of what wrestling is with Hulk
Yeah.
Hogan and kind of stuff. And they were the changing force in that where they were like, hey, let's do, they were like younger, they were cooler, let's do some different camera angles, let's get in there and really show
Hmm.
instead of having a static camera, let's come in with a ring rope. The Von Erichs in themselves weren't as maybe personified as flamboyant, but they did each have their personality and their look, and that was super fun to play into. And even though they are definitely a real life family, and Sean Durkin was such a fan of wrestling, and
Yeah.
this family did bestow so much tragedy. They were compared to the Kennedys, and when I first started, I was
Mm.
like, you can't touch the Kennedys. What are you talking about? And then, as I obviously learned all about their story, and Sean, fleshed it out so well. And the more documentaries you watched, you were like, no,
Yeah.
these so many of these boys were taken before their prime. They weren't allowed to live. They didn't live their life out. They had
Hmm.
so much light and so much talent, and they that's not what their life became. And I think it was just fascinating, and I absolutely loved it. And even from a
Yeah.
costume point of view, you're looking at real family, and you're taking upon that, just like every period piece or biopic,
Hmm.
maestro, whatever you're talking about, you're looking at real people. But then they become characters. We're making a movie. We're not making a documentary. And with that, you have to have some artistic license as well,
Yeah.
So I thought it was fabulous to be a part of it. The second I read it, I literally said to the universe, "This is my movie." Like
Mm.
loved it so much.
Yeah, there's something about I remember the show Glow, Netflix's Glow. I think it was like the
Yeah,
first or second episode whenever Betty Gilpin's character realizes as an actress like, "Oh my God, it's a soap opera." And the sort of I kept thinking about that line all throughout, but this is like such an operatic, huge, unbelievably big story. And I love how Sean, especially when the second half of the movie when some really sad things happen. I really like how some of it is shrouded in a little bit of mystery. I think it really pulls the viewer to like want to go and do a lot of research about the family. Um, okay, so let me I want to ask about a couple specific looks, if I may.
Of
Um,
course.
so I think well, okay, yeah. So the first time that we see Kevin, Zac Efron's character, rehearsing that or filming that one sequence, he's wearing that gorgeous red, sparkly
Yeah.
jacket.
Yeah.
And I love the detail on the arm. It's like gold, a little bit of silver going into it. I guess I wanted to know from something about maybe Zac Efron's background. I think All American Boy. I think he at the beginning of the film he wears a lot of blue with like blue sleeveless shirt and the ring for the first time. I think we see him in like a blue uh um shorts, I guess you would say. But
Yeah.
I love the I was in bikini bottoms, like that's not right. But I guess yeah, I just want to know about maybe what you think how Kevin maybe approaches the theatricality and presenting himself as a figure.
Right. Well, there's so many
That's like five questions there, sorry.
there's like five questions, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
hope to like touch upon each
Yeah,
beat. So
sorry.
absolutely, like I'm so glad you captured all that because that's exactly what we're trying to portray. And
Mm,
Kevin's character is kind of, if I was to do like the Breakfast Club breakdown of the characters, he's the jock, right? He's
right.
like the all around.
Emilio Estevez, yes.
He's Emilio Esteves' character, and even his ring robe kind of looks like a hoodie in most
Hmm.
parts, carrying on past that the one costume you had actually brought upon. We had played it out. There was actually a match before that that didn't end up in the final cut of the
Okay.
movie, and Sean had definitely wanted to go from darkness to light,
Hmm.
and in a lot of, in a big picture way and a little pictures way as well, just in the wrestling ring. And the first ring that we shot in, which could still be in the fight with the Sheik, is just all black, and he
Hmm.
comes out in a black lame, just a black lame ring robe that's very, just without the hood yet, but
Okay.
sort of like in a very kind of a duller blue that we never see him in again. And that sort of, and then he starts to get brighter and brighter. Now that the exact costume you're talking about was a replica, and I
Hmm.
searched high and low to get that 1970s lyrics, sparkle boucle. I mean, it was like, probably used for God, I don't even know what it would be used for. And when we finally found it at ISW, I was like, hallelujah. It was like so exciting. And it had all that texture, and we were able to replicate it. And I think we got our trim either from downtown or we shot in Louisiana. So I also was, not only were using like ISW and beautiful, fabric stores in New York, but being in Louisiana, I used the Mardi Gras stores. And so obviously we had all
Mm.
the sparkle and shine. So we got like two-tone trim. And it really was a replica of what exactly he was wearing at the time. And
Yeah.
sort of that was, he hasn't quite got into his actual look, which we kind of see if you followed Kevin Von Erich's career. It's that hoodie mostly. And I think Sean's playing with the ideas. He's not too sure of himself. He's not good on the stick, they call it, because he doesn't have the overall scope to be what a wrestler takes, because you also have to be so much of an actor as well.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
actually just a solid athlete and a good, decent human being. And
Hmm.
those two things weren't enough for him to go on to actually making it through. And as that's why he was always being, brother was always being outpicked to be the next one in line, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it's sort of very interesting. And then in Kevin's overall scope, he definitely starts in anything that's like a knit, so like t-shirts and cutoffs,
Yeah.
and there's like, I have a lot of mesh in there, and perforated tees and things just to give like air and movement and lightness. And then as he sort of starts to, his reality of actually being the title goes away, and he's going to now take over and be a manager, and he gets married and have kids, then we kind of see him turn into polos. He gets a bit of a collar, but it's still a
Hmm.
knit shirt, and then eventually he's in shirts, and
Hmm.
pleated front pants basically too. And it sort of follows yeah, that's what follows, following Kevin's real life take on it. And then at the very end, in his life, not in the end of our movie, but in Kevin's life, he ends up moving to Kauai.
Yeah.
And he's got like, he kind of wears like Bali-esque shirts. This is now, if you look into the 90s, that was kind of in at the time anyhow. So
Yeah.
that's how we also made sure to end, Kevin, Zach's last frame in the movie. It's sort of this like Zen type of like experience of what's happening in his life, kind of coming to terms with everything. His
Yeah.
son's in his lap. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I kept staring at that when I watched it again last night. I was just staring at that shirt that he was wearing.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually kind of thought. by this point, this man has been through so much, and I was just like, I don't know if the Kevin that we met at the beginning of the movie would pick up that shirt for himself at that point of his life. I think that was a really great um note to end on him just visually. I felt like it made me question a lot of stuff for him. Um I will say with the red sparkly jacket, I kept thinking, I mean, that poor guy can't get the lines right when he's fumbling over his words, and I was just like, I don't know, I felt like he hasn't come into his own yet, and I was just like, just think about what you're wearing, Kevin. Just think about like how you need to own yourself while you're holding the microphone. That's I just kept thinking about that. Um I did wonder if these brothers do so much together. Very obviously tight-knit family. I just kept wondering how much maybe you put into consideration about like not like hand-me-downs, but like I was just curious about maybe thinking of how these characters would shop for clothes. Is that something that you put into your process of like selecting like a wardrobe for character to character?
Were you in our room while we prepped? You're hitting all of the
I'm
things.
just I'm a giant costume nerd, and I think that the thing that I love about costume design is just that I don't know, it's just such a I was a performer and I loved costume day when we finally got our costume. And I just thought that I don't know, this specifically because of the closeness of the family, I could depending on where each young man's physique is in, maybe they're grabbing stuff from each other's dressers or from each other's closet. I don't know. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, there was definitely that trait involved in basically definitely in the overall thought of it. And
Yeah.
Sean, even looking at his past movies, likes to play upon basically in real life at a moment in time, maybe a year or so, you kind of pick the same things in your closet
Yeah.
regardless. Or I'm wearing something I've had for years. Like, you know what I mean? It's sort of like it's natural that you don't have, even though I do costumes and I'm shopping all the time, you kind of gravitate towards the same things. And then
Right.
you have this family that's obviously close brothers, and they are going to do hand me downs for sure. And we did, Sean, and definitely did want to repeat things.
Hmm.
I did sort of push him out of that idea a little bit in the terms of we're focusing on our brothers, each have their own specific personality, and in our movie they're four completely different body shapes, and you
Yeah.
have Harry who's
Totally.
taller, so on and so on. So where we definitely made that hit was Mike, the youngest brother,
Mm.
because it was also correct for his character because he's the baby of the family. And if you kind of watch it, he has the most repeat of t-shirts. He's kind of wears the blue t-shirt a lot and a
Hmm.
few other things. And that sort of played into Mike being Sean had put Mike and the brother Chris that was not written into the movie kind of into like one person,
Yeah.
and just sort of making sure like his backstory, or his story I should say, his real story was he definitely did not want to get into wrestling. He definitely was pulled into wrestling.
Hmm.
He wanted to be a musician. In our story he was into prog rock, and because that's what
Mhm.
Rush basically is, and Tom
Yeah.
Sawyer, like one of their big prominent songs. And anytime you saw the pictures of the brothers, it would be like all the brothers like shirtless and like speedos and like hunked up, and then like Mike would be like in a polo and corduroys and like
Yeah.
wallaby. And so we definitely played into that and made sure that maybe if one character was going to do it, that one hit the note the most. But
Yeah.
someone like Kevin, like Zach's character, he had like 60 changes.
Oh, God.
I repeated some things along the way, but you did, if you wanted to tell a story over 11, 12 years, it kind of would get confusing if you kept doing it. You wouldn't
Hmm.
maybe get into the next chunk of what they were trying to say over like a span of time.
Yeah. I was actually gonna ask about Stanley's character just because I kept thinking anytime like Harris and Zach would go to meet him, I was like, Mike Von Erich's clothes look totally different. Maybe he's wearing like a band t-shirt or he's wearing like a leather vest. And I was just like, maybe on some weird level, Mike is subconsciously trying to like look different than his brothers because I kept thinking about that first scene when Holt, ranks the
Yeah.
sons and he's last. I was like, oh man, I can't imagine what that would feel like, and maybe subconsciously that goes into his outfits. Who knows? Um, I do want to ask about Lily James's wedding dress
Mm-hmm.
because that is I can't remember the year they got married, but I feel like that's pure 80s perfection. I
Yes.
think especially her hair and the way that the fabric just like juts, the veil juts out of her head. I guess I just wanted to know, tell me about finding or creating the perfect 80s wedding dress.
Yeah, for Lily. First of all, I was a huge fan of Lily, and the boys as well. But as a woman, I love my actresses,
Yeah.
and such a huge fan of hers. And she came in very just like open to whatever. And we sort of there's even on her date outfits that we don't really see a good full shot of. I mean, she just rocked them. She looked so good
Yeah.
and so sexy and um, so of that space and time, and she felt it for sure. So for the wedding, it takes place about 1984 because that's when David is kind of we're tying it into we fast forwarded a couple events in their lives, and David is going to die pretty shortly afterwards, and that was 1984. And in real life, Kevin's wedding to Pam, which is they're still married, happily married, solid relationship, is summertime, very like 16 candles with the off the shoulder and like that sheer like little like I don't that weird like bonnet hat that they used to wear
Mm-hmm.
then. And ours was supposed to be
Yeah.
winter. And when you looked at all the brothers, Kerry Von Erich basically had this over the top, very 80s wedding. And he was the most 80s character, anyhow, in our movie and in real life. So we sort of more played upon that. And that kind of came out organically. One, we knew we wanted to do something that was like the brothers and all the groomsmen and they're together. And this is kind of like our happy moment
Mm-hmm.
in our story, right? And like, you don't know if there's tragedy is going to bestow before you know it. So we made sure we got these vintage tuxes that looked amazing, in this like dove gray
Oh,
scheme. And yeah,
those tuxes are amazing. So
there's
amazing.
they're really good. And even Harris actually wanted to keep his, but when it came time for him to leave, he couldn't fit into a suitcase. And I was like, "You want to keep the tux?" He was like, "I love the tux." I'm like, "Great." So so dressing Lily, I mean, it's like I think only like three or four choices. I was like, here's our choices. And they were all kind of different 80s silhouettes, sort of playing upon that. Some of them were the higher lace and, like a
Yeah.
big neck and all this stuff. But it was sort of, we were in that gravitational pull. And once we got the off the shoulder, tiny waist, big fat skirt, I was like, oh, hello, I forgot your Cinderella. And the silhouette couldn't look any better on anybody else. But I mean,
Right.
she just is so gorgeous. And I think we purchased that like something on like Poshmark or someplace like that. So it was
Okay.
something that we had taken a chance on buying it, seeing if it would kind of work, and it was just looked amazing. And then from that, we were working closely with Western Costume Company here in Los Angeles,
Mm-hmm.
and they were being very nice with their budget and helping us out a lot. So I had called them and I was like, I need the most 1980s veil. All I need is one. And she came back, Christina, and she was like, all we have is this one. And I'm like, that's it. That is the one. And I'm not even going to show her any others. Like it
Oh my
had that
God.
point and the pearls and the poof and stuff. So we had to freshen it up and things like that, but it was great. And then when I went shoe shopping for her, they were behind the scenes doing their own choreography, kind of
Mm-hmm.
unbeknownst to us. Like they were working it out before they could send it to us. So I wanted to make sure she had something she could dance in, which timed out perfectly. So I went to go get the biggest crinoline to put underneath the wedding gown.
Yeah.
We were in Louisiana, and I was like, oh, there's white cowboy boots for weddings. Yes, we need those too. And so it was like, it
Oh my
was
God.
great. Yes. And she was like,
Ah.
she loved her cowboy boots, especially being a British person. She was just like, I have to wear cowboy boots. So she wore them a lot. She wore them a lot when you didn't even see the full shots of her feet,
Mm-hmm.
but she had cowboy boots on for sure.
Lily James is somebody who you can tell watching her that she likes the value of a costume to help her with the character. That's what she looks good. She knows how to wear clothes and she knows how to use the clothes to help embody the character. Even something that is like seemingly simple as the first time that her and Zach meet and she's like teasing him a little bit. I was staring at her blouse and I was just like the second time that I watched it and I was like, all right. Yeah, she knows how to wear anything. Um I want to ask about the value of spandex or the value of lycra, if you will.
Yeah.
Um I remember wearing like spandex in the 80s, and I that is such a specific, reference point. And I just wanted to maybe like, do you have to find pieces? Do you have to make them? Is it like super hard to work with? There's something about the combination of the fabric and the color choices that really are really transportive. Really.
Absolutely. Well, we had definitely gone in thinking making the trunks would be the easiest thing
Yeah,
possible. First of all, there's access to buying them and spandex everywhere. And, especially with
sure.
superhero movies, it's like just a
That too.
plethora of certain
Yeah.
kind. I'm not even like well versed in the spandex world. And I was like, okay, so, but getting all the spandex cards and trying to pick. And so I definitely was trying to hit color.
Right.
And then as we finally mapped out, like once, Sean and I had our meetings and Mateus, the DP, we were mapped out how many we needed. And so we started at the ranch, then we went to the sportatorium. So
Okay.
we had prep in a couple weeks into filming until we got to the actual like where we're wearing our trunks. And in that whole process, when we finally figured out how many trunks we needed for all of our characters, whether it be they need multiples for sweat or blood, or if there was a tear, you don't want to hold up
Mm,
camera, or just they all had stunt doubles. Not that most of them were. Some of them were used, some of them weren't used. And then all of their other consequent matches, which there was about 21. I don't know what we landed in the final edit of the movie. And then plus give or take some with some cameos with their sons and things like that. So,
hmm.
but so we needed about 100 trunks. And meanwhile,
Wow.
we're focusing on alterations, anything else we need to get made, some just, hero costumes. And the biggest prominent pieces would be the ring ropes for everybody.
Mhm.
So I had my cutter fitter, he had his hands full, Brick Allen doing that. Like that was enough. Like that was every day was like, it was like a very stressful day. So we had brought some from High Spots, a wrestling company. We had bought some to try on everybody when they would come in and say, how do these fit? And we would build a pattern off of that. And
Okay.
luckily, my ACD, Aileen Abercrombie, who had a background in fashion, was like, we can't get this done here. You need a certain machine to make sure that they're cut properly.
Mm,
I'm
okay.
going to ask High Spots if they can fit us in our schedule. And because it was the Von Erich movie, we hardly ever got no's. So basically,
That's
Josh at High Spots,
crazy.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, like because there's such fandom, they're such a beloved family. So they were like, yeah, we can do that. I mean, our schedule was crazy. Some of them were just a few day turnaround. By the time
Wow.
if someone was cast, we'd send someone to her house. Doesn't matter what state they lived in. I would find somebody to go do a fitting, fit it on them, kind of hit all the places because you did want it to look period. Ultimately, not all the characters, not all our boys wanted to wear a period higher cut with a wire,
Right.
and a lot of times you can see it in the camera, it's always lower. And I'm like, yeah, I would go to set, pull it up, but it was like always a back and forth dance. But ultimately, we wanted to make something that didn't look like it was off the rack,
Mhm.
present modern day. And so, yeah, so we do a pattern. We would take an illustration or one of the photos, we would find the fabric and we'd send it off to High Spots and they would turn it around for us and send them back. And it was always just of course you had our backups. We had something if something was going to happen with shipping or something, but you didn't want to go that route. You wanted to make sure that we were trying to
Hmm.
execute the vision, totally complement this movie and make sure it looks as real as possible and have some fun doing it. It's fun to make clothes. We do costumes, like we want to make the clothes, as much as we can.
Yeah, and that kept I keep staring at the pictures behind you, and it's sort of like these
Yeah.
people who are so like I love every single thing there, and it's just so like that Ric Flair costume, like that is there's so much character in just that. When I saw it again, and I knew it was coming, I sort of like my jaw dropped. I was like, it's so over the top. It's so pink. It's so fun. And it just made me think about how maybe these men and all of these athletes would want themselves to look on stage and to like create a persona. And I don't want I kept thinking about like maybe I'm sure Ric Flair has people making his stuff, but maybe he goes in there with a hot glue gun and adds a couple more feathers. I don't know. I just think it was there's so much I just feel like these costumes have so much character, and I have like a bazillion questions about every single outfit, especially because it spans so much time.
Yeah.
Um, I
Yeah.
do. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, obviously, Ric Flair is very special. And when it came
Mm-hmm.
to choosing his robe, Sean basically gave me carte blanche because he's so iconic. And when you look
Mm-hmm.
at any deep dive you do into Ric Flair's robes, it's like they're just all so incredible. He
You have a lot
really,
to pick from. Yeah.
I mean, it's such a fun personality he owns, and Sean tries to make that point where you afterwards, when he goes into the locker room and was like, "That was like a hoot. Let's go get a drink." Like he tries to show the camaraderie between being on stage and acting out the persona, and then in real life, they're like when they take off the masks and they take off everything, and they're just people that are like admiring each other's work, right? Like that's
Yeah.
basically what they're doing. Yeah. So, but
Oh,
obviously, I can't even believe it's almost like how did I even not know to do a pink one because once he was towards the end of our shooting of the matches, and so once I like looked at all of our ring robes, I was like, I have to pick something pink or purple. He had some other bright like over the
mm-hmm.
top colors, but nobody was wearing pink. I needed to have the feathers. I needed to have the Liberace moment. And then when it came to that, it came down to like two options of that, and it was sort of like, what can we execute in the time and money allowed? And it was
Man.
so fun to recreate. I mean, there was feathers everywhere in the office and sequins and glue and this and that. I was just like, it was so cool, and it was such a showstopper to have it on the mannequin as you walked by, and
Yeah.
everybody wanted to like touch it and stuff, and that's super fun. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that so much. Yeah, he that looks different than everything else in the movie. Not just scale and theatricality, but the color. The color looks like it like punches you in the face almost, like how
Yes.
great
Yeah,
it
'cause
is.
most of it's primary colors until
Yeah.
that happens. Exactly.
Um, I just wanted to tell you a couple things that I also just really love before I ask you my last question. Like the fabulous why am I
Fabulous
can't read,
Freebirds.
can't read my own handwriting. Yeah, the fabulous Freebirds. I love their like mid-thigh boots. I love those. I for some reason on the second watch, I love Maura Tierney. I think she's a beautiful, fantastic actress. And that scene where she can't put the dress on, like, oh God, just that. Rarely do we see a scene in the film that has that much emotional heft surrounding a costume piece or a piece of clothing like that. I thought I was really drawn to that. There's just so much amazing, amazing stuff in here. But I wanted to tell you that um, something usually my favorite thing to ask costume designers is if you could steal something from your own designs of this project and put it in your own closet, what would it be? Because I want that. I want all of Holt's button-up shirts. I love that he has like a. I love he's in so much plaid pattern. But the thing that I want, I won't be able to wear it until I keep going to the gym, is that yellow mesh thing that Zac Efron wears, which is just so flamboyant. I love it so much. But yeah, I just wanted to know what you would take for yourself.
Oh boy, my takeaway would be that's a really good question. I think I would take David's Yellow Rose of Texas robe
Ah,
because it was
that's good.
exquisitely done, and it just was just a pop on our camera frame, but the detail involved in that and the bedazzling and the trim and the beautiful the silk lame we use, that it is really a showstopper, and
Mm,
really symbolizes his character as well. It was like
yeah.
once Sean and I met, and I knew he only needed a couple ring robes because some of his other matches would start during the match. That was that us deciding which ring robes would see we the best ones to choose. It was like Yellow Rose of Texas for sure, for sure, for sure. So I think I would take that offhand. I think that would be, but the rankings may change, as Fritz would say. So, but I loved
So,
Holden. Something about like Fritz's character was, yeah, he was always like this, and he had like
hmm.
calico prints, and I made sure because he was like the sergeant, he always had some of his shirts had like the epaulets in it.
Yeah, I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah, and it just we had to build a fat pad into his costumes because he had, changed. Usually he's actually trim and fit like he is now, but on Mindhunter, he had turned into like a Tench character and kind of was, eating and, doing his thing like that. So by the time I'd seen him again, he had lost all of his weight again and was in like prime fighting shape, and had to also
Mm.
perform in the movie at the beginning,
Yeah, yeah.
looking 20 years younger as well. So we made sure the one day he had to be himself, he looked fantastic. He looked like himself. And the other days he looked like Fritz and he wore a fat suit, and he was very pleased doing that and making it all work. So it was
That's
great.
great. Oh, I love him. He needs to be in more stuff.
Oh, I love him too.
He's
I
he's
really,
he's just such a, I don't know. There's something about him that just really draws you in. And when I was like, oh, he's the patriarch of this amazing cast, and I was like, this could be good. And I was not let down at all.
oh, I was thrilled when I knew I could reach out to him and be like, hey, guess who's costume designing the young?
That's wonderful.
So,
Oh wow.
yeah, he just brings it. He brings it, and he really, really, really has passion for his craft, and it
Yeah.
shows. Mhm.
Ugh. Well, thank you so much for your time. Who knew that we could, I mean, we could probably still talk more about spandex and stuff like that. I'm sure everyone's just making spandex and Lycra jokes at you, so I apologize for that.
No,
That I just think there's so much heft to this movie, and I think sort of what I was saying at the beginning, that like the color, the cut of silhouettes of everything, the theatricality, the overtopness, I think is really wonderful. So thank you so much for your time and yeah, being so generous with me.
oh my gosh, Joy, my pleasure. Thank you for wanting to talk about the Ironclad costume. That means so
Yeah,
much to me. So thank you.
yeah. So if you end up going to Ohio, I wish you well.
Okay.
It's really flat. So yeah, that's the only thing that no hills, so that's good.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Have a good rest of your day. Stay safe and all that jazz.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Talk to you
Bye.
later.